Alright, in this lesson we're going to see how we can add volumetric lighting effects to any type of a light within 3ds Max. Alright, now the volumetric lighting effects are some of those effects that you'll see whenever you have any kind of a light cone or any kind of a light source that is penetrating through some kind of a medium. Maybe it's fog or smoke or something along those lines. Now those types of effects are actually very easy to add within 3ds Max, and we can actually add those from a couple of different places. One is if we select the light itself, and if we take a look inside the Atmosphere and Effects rollout, we can add an atmospheric effect from this area. So we can just go to Add, and we can add a volume light. Right? So that's one method of adding. We can also just go up to Rendering and take a look at the environment. And from here, we have the exact same rollout. So we can add an atmospheric effect from this area. So let's say we add a volume light, and in this instance it's going to ask us to pick the light. Now if we had assigned it over here from the light itself, it wouldn't ask us to do that. So let's pick the light. There we go, and we're going to use this Spotlight 1. Okay, so we've added this volumetric effect. Now let's go ahead and take a render and see what we have. Alright, so you can actually see now a little bit of a light cone that is coming down. Right? It's definitely there, although it is fairly subtle, so we could always come up and start to raise this density, which should make this fog now appear a little bit thicker within this volume. And I'll also point out that this volumetric effect can actually be applied to any type of a light. It really doesn't necessarily need to be a spotlight, although the spotlight does make it much easier to see this actual effect. If we do it on an omnidirectional light, it's just going to fill our scene with this fog. This is just a little bit more self-contained. So we also have things like the fog color that we have control over. So if we needed to adjust this or tint this anyway, we do have that control. Here we go. Now one thing that you will notice by looking at this is that yes, we do have this cone, but really we don't have these volumetric shadows that would really kind of sell this effect. So let's go back to the light itself and make sure that we do have shadows turned on. Now, in order to get a good result with these volumetric shadows, we do want to use these shadow maps. Alright, and we'll give this just a moment. And if you look closely, you should now start to see kind of these light streaking effects within here. Well, it is sort of a subtle effect. So let's maybe go back to this volume light. I can maybe get back to it from up here. There we go. So maybe just give this a little bit more thickness, just to kind of boost that up a little bit more. Alright, now if you look at this, you'll notice that we actually do have a few of these kind of unusual areas. You can really see it right in here, where we have a little actual gap between the shadow and this cup. So this is probably related to the bias settings that we had looked at a few lessons previous. So let's take a look at the shadow map parameters rollout, and let's lower this bias. We'll start with something fairly low, like 0.01, and we'll go ahead and take the sample range and maybe drop this down a bit. Okay, and let's see what that does for us. Alright, very nice. So now we can really start to see a little bit more accurate shadows here, and we can actually see some of this streaking effect as the shadow passes through this handle of the cup. Alright, so now we can really quickly and easily start to see some of these very, very interesting volumetric type of effects. Now we can actually take it a step further than this. Instead of just having this clean, uniform kind of fog, we can actually add a little bit of noise into this to kind of give it a little bit more realism. So let's give it a little bit of noise. We'll turn that checkbox on, and then we can start to dial up the amount. Alright, and it's kind of a subtle effect at first. You can start to see that it has actually changed things up a little bit. So let's maybe give it a fractal noise. So it might need to come in and possibly adjust some of the size and the levels. Might take a little bit of finessing on this. Alright, so let's start to maybe increase the levels. Alright. Let's drop this size down a little bit so we can maybe get a little bit smaller segments in here. There we go. And now you can start to see where this is beginning to break up and become a little less uniform. Alright, so let's maybe even bring this down a little bit more. There we go. Maybe give this a little bit higher phase. Alright, and let's maybe even make this size a little bit smaller. So let's begin to dial this down. There we go, and now you can really start to see some of this noise beginning to take shape. That actually may be a little bit too small, but you kind of start to get the idea of where we can go with this. Maybe even give this a little bit higher density. Alright, and all the while you can start to see, again, we have these nice volumetric effects, although they do start to become a little less noticeable now that they are kind of being broken up by this noise, these overall shadow effects. Alright, and if we wanted to even maybe spruce this up just a little bit more, we could always add something like a glow effect, just like what we did earlier. So if we go back to the rendering menu, take a look at the effects, we could always add a lens effect and add a glow just like what we did previous, except this time we can come in and pick a light. There you go. And this time we should now actually start to see the light source start to glow. So there's the fog, and if we have a light source, that should now be illuminated through this glow effect. Alright, and there we have it, some very quick and easy to set up volumetric lighting within 3ds Max.